cherries on the back porch. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. High summer wind through the trees. High summer, it's going to leave. After the dawn, before the dusk. Remember this mood before it's dusk. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. All the things you cannot hold. The grass so green, the sky so blue. After the dawn, home before dusk. The seconds slip and turn to dust. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. Ice cold cherries on the back porch. Ice cold cherries on the back porch.
Welcome everyone to BOA's 23rd annual and first ever virtual Dine Rhyme. I'm Peter Connors, publisher of BOA Editions. Tonight we are gathered together to honor the great BOA and American poet Lucille Clifton and the publication of How to Carry Water, Selected Poems of Lucille Clifton. And of course, Dine Rhyme also serves as a way to financially support BOA's nonprofit publishing mission to bring vital voices to a world of readers. Please visit 32auctions.com/BOA and bid on some exciting auction items that will also go a long way in supporting BOA's mission. Please remember that the auction only lasts until tomorrow at 11 a.m., so please place your bids and remember to check your items. I also want to take a moment to thank the generous sponsors and major donors to BOA Editions who helped us to create this event and to continue publishing stellar new editions of poetry, fiction, and literature. Thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, LitTap, the Farish Foundation, the LGBTQ Giving Circle, the Rochester Area Community Foundation, Pittsford Family Dental, and Boo Pool and Jewelry. Thanks also to the many individual donors who support BOA throughout the year. A complete list of event and auction sponsors can be found at boaeditions.org/Dine Rhyme. I also want to give a very special thank you to the Lannan Foundation, who have generously supported BOA in various ways for nearly 20 years, most recently providing a $40,000 matching grant in support of the publication of How to Carry Water. We can't thank you enough. It was also through an introduction by Martha Jessup at the Lannan Foundation that Michael Silverblatt, renowned literary critic and host of the nationally syndicated Bookworm radio program, came to be involved with this year's Dine Rhyme. Tonight you will enjoy a captivating discussion between Michael and BOA poet and editor of How to Carry Water, Aracelis Girmay. You will also see an excerpt from the documentary Lucille Clifton, A Poet's Life and Legacy, which is being produced by BOA and Hunger Media. And finally, a musical rendition of Lucille Clifton's poem, Let There Be New Flowering, by the Cornelius Eady Trio. Together, we will all celebrate the ongoing legacy of Lucille Clifton. Lucille Clifton's accomplishments are impressive under any circumstances. She was an award-winning poet, fiction writer, and author of children's books. Her poetry collection, Blessing the Boat's new and selected poems, won the National Book Award for Poetry. And in 1988, she became the only author to have two collections selected in the same year as finalists for the Pulitzer Prize. Those books were Good Woman, Poems and a Memoir, and Next, New Poems. In 1996, her collection, The Terrible Stories, was a finalist for the National Book Award. Among her many other awards and accolades are the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Frost Medal, and an Emmy Award. In 2013, her posthumously published The Collected Poems of Lucille Clifton was awarded the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. I am proud to say that all of those titles are available through BOA Editions in print and online. But that list barely scratches the surface of who Lucille Clifton was and the impact her poetry continues to have on the world. In truth, her words speak to readers as powerfully now as they ever have. To start our celebration of Lucille Clifton's multifaceted legacy, we will first hear from another great poet, BOA poet, Aracelis Girmay. In addition to her own three highly accomplished books, The Black Maria, Kingdom Animalia, which won the 2011 Isabella Gardner Poetry Award, and the GLCA New Writers Award, and was a finalist for both the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and her debut collection, Teeth. Aracelis Girmay is the recipient of fellowships from Cave Canem and the National Endowment for the Arts, among other places, and won a 2015 Whiting Award for Poetry. She currently teaches in Hampshire College's School for Interdisciplinary Arts and Drew University's Low Residency MFA program in poetry. Most recently, Aracelis took on the daunting task of compiling and introducing this new collection of Lucille Clifton poetry, How to Carry Water, which includes 10 previously unpublished poems. I would also like to make one more special announcement before Aracelis begins her reading. While working on How to Carry Water and considering different ways to honor Lucille Clifton's legacy, we hit upon the idea of creating a selection of BOA books dedicated solely to poetry by women of color. We call it Blessing the Boat's Selections. With support from the Amazon Literary Partnership Poetry Fund, facilitated by the Academy of American Poets, 2 BOA titles have now been published as Blessing the Boat's Selections. The first was Year of the Dog by Deborah Paredes, and the second is Letters to a Young Brown Girl by Barbara Jane Reyes. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that Aracelis Girmay has agreed to serve as 2021 to 2023 Editor-at-Large for Blessing the Boat's Selections. In the weeks to come, we will be sharing more information and submission guidelines for the Blessing the Boat selection series. But tonight, you, our Dine Rhyme guests, are the first to hear this exciting news. And with that, I welcome BOA poet, editor-at-large of the Blessing the Boat selection series, and editor of How to Carry Water, Selected Poems of Lucille Clifton, Aracelis Girmay.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you to everyone out there. Echoed thanks to all the folks who have helped bring this book into being. And just wanted to say to Peter again, Genevieve Hartman, Ron Martin Dent, Amy Connors, Sandy Knight, the Clifton family. It's been a real honor and impossibility to get to work on this selected. So I should tell all of you out there, this feels kind of surreal, but if you're out there, I'm in my home in Brooklyn, so there will be noise. So that'll just be part of it. I thought that I would read two short little paragraphs from the foreword, and then share some of the poems that I felt moved to share with you tonight. How to Carry Water begins with the poem 5/23/67, R.I.P. Written in 1967, it was not published until 2012 in The Collected. I give deep and abiding thanks to editors Kevin Young and Michael Glazer for the hours and devotion which brought that collection into the world, and out of which this selected emerges. Lucille Clifton was born Thelma Lucille Sales on June 27, 1936. If someone happened to have looked up at the sky that day, they would have seen what looked like a moon split in half, 57% of the surface of the moon visible from the earth. I love to think of this poet born with 12 fingers under a moon, half visible, half invisible to our eyes. This poet of one eye fixed and another wandering, feeling both ordinary and magic, standing astride at least two worlds, being born out of one Thelma, her mother, into the old and new bones of her name. So beginning there with her name, I'm pretty sure that the Book of Light was the first book of Miss Lucille's that I came upon when I was in high school. And I'll start there. Light, ray, stream, gleam, beam, sun, glow, flicker, shine, lucid, spark, scintilla, flash, blaze, flame, fire, serene, luciferous, lightning bolt, luster, shimmer, glisten, gloss, brightness, brilliance, splendor, sheen, dazzle, sparkle, luminous, reflection, kindle, illuminate, brighten, glorious, radiate, radiant, splendid, clarify, clear. Roget's Thesaurus. This poem is called The Lost Baby Poem. And it carries one of the lines of hers that I'm often thinking about, and I'm thinking about in grad school the amazing and brilliant Cornelius Eady, who we'll hear from tonight. I remember, I think it was Elizabeth Alexander's class that she brought us to the library to talk with Cornelius Eady about Lucille Clifton. And I remember him saying that she was a genius, and him talking about her genius. And this line, "If I am ever less than a mountain," this line from this poem is one that I walk with, that I've walked with, thinking about that measure and expectation of being. So the Lost Baby poem. The time I dropped your almost body down to meet the waters under the city, and run one with the sewage to the sea. What did I know about waters rushing back? What did I know about drowning or being drowned? You would have been born in winter, in the year of the disconnected gas and no car. We would have made the thin walk over Genesee Hill into the Canada wind to watch you slip like ice into strangers' hands. You would have fallen naked as snow into winter. If you were here, I could tell you these and some other things. If I am ever less than a mountain, for your definite brothers and sisters, let the rivers pour over my head. Let the sea take me for a spiller of seas. Let black men call me stranger, always, for your never named sake. Generations. People who are going to be, in a few years, bottoms of trees, bear a responsibility to something besides people. If it was only you and me sharing the consequences, it would be different. It would be just generations of men. But this business of war, these war kinds of things, are erasing those natural, obedient generations who ignored pride, stood on no hind legs, begged no water, stole no bread, did their own things. And the generations of rice, of coal, of grasshoppers, by their invisibility, denounce us. I'm just amazed by these poems that are so potent and speak to the atom of things over years and years and years. Surely I am able to write poems celebrating grass and how the blue in the sky can flow green or red, and the waters lean against the Chesapeake shore like a familiar. Poems about nature and landscape, surely. But whenever I begin, the trees wave their knotted branches, and why is there under that poem always an other poem? This belief in the magic of whiteness, that it is the smooth pebble in your hand, that it is the godmother's best gift, that it explains, allows, assures, entitles, that it can sprout singular blossoms like Jack's bean and singular verandas from which to watch them rise. It is a spell, winding round on itself, Grimm's awful fable. And it turns into Cape Town and Johannesburg, as surely as the beanstalk leads to the giant's actual country, where Jack lies broken at the meadow's edge, and the land is in ruins, no magic, no anything. My goodness. I'm thinking about the complexities of these poems that I've said before. You know, many of them could fit inside of my palm, like the text itself. And yet, I mean, I've read these over many years, and I'm amazed by how so much that is new reveals itself according to the times, but also according to the new questions that the poems help me ask, even about the craft of them. And one of the things that I so deeply learned from her, and I'm thinking about Fanny Howe talking about poetics and ethics of bewilderment, but the idea that one's poetics might be also one's ethics. I think with Lucille Clifton, I'm thinking about kinship and this insistence on kinship, and also an insistence that we all have the capacity to carry such beauty, and among the other things, cruelty, and this willingness or insistence on the turning, the looking at oneself and asking questions, and even indicting. At last we killed the roaches, Mama and me. She sprayed, I swept the ceiling, and they fell, dying onto our shoulders, in our hair, covering us with red. The tribe was broken. The cooking pots were ours again, and we were glad. Such cleanliness was grace when I was 12, only for a few nights, and then not much. My dreams were blood, my hands were blades, and it was murder, murder all over the place. Cruelty. Don't talk to me about cruelty or what I am capable of. When I wanted the roaches dead, I wanted them dead, and I killed them. I took a broom to their country and smashed and sliced without warning, without stopping, and I smiled all the time I was doing it. It was a holocaust of roaches, bodies, parts of bodies, red all over the ground. I didn't ask their names. They had no names worth knowing. Now I watch myself whenever I enter a room. I never know what I might do. I thought I'd read a few of Lucille Clifton's poems toward her mother. This one is called February 13th, 1980, 21 years after her mother died. February 13th, 1980. 21 years of my life, you have been the lost color in my eye, my secret blindness. All my scenes turned gray with your going. Mother, I have worn your name like a shield. It has torn but protected me all these years. Now even your absence comes of age. I put on a dress called woman for this day, but I am not grown away from you, whatever I say. O antic God, return to me, my mother in her 30s, leaned across the front porch, the huge pillow of her breasts pressing against the rail, summoning me in for bed. I am almost the dead woman's age times 2. I can barely recall her song, the scent of her hands, though her wild hair scratches my dreams at night. Return to me, O Lord of then and now, my mother's calling, her young voice humming my name. I mean, even just that Lord of then and now, to think of God in time is just, I don't know, mind-blowing. This poem's called The Lost Women. I need to know their names, those women I would have walked with, jauntily, the way men go in groups, swinging their arms, and those sweating women whom I would have joined after a hard game to chew the fat. What would we have called each other laughing, joking into our beer? Where are my gangs, my teams, my mislaid sisters? All the women who could have known me. Where in the world are their names? Wind on the St. Mary's River, January 2002. It is the elders trying to return, sensing the coast is near and they will soon be home again. They have walked under 2 oceans and too many seas, the nap of their silver hair whipping as the wind sings out to them, this way, this way. And they come rising steadily, not swimming exactly toward shore, toward redemption. But the wind dies down, and they sigh and still and descend, while we watch from our porches, not remembering their names, not calling out Jeremiah, Fanny Lou, Geronimo, but only white caps on the water. Look, white caps. This is one of the newly published poems. It's called Entering Earth. The door is bone. Push through. You will be dressed in blood. Rise up and wobble off toward cavalry. The ground time here will be brief. Before you remember your actual name, you will have rattled back to bone. Hover above the ivory gate. Hold your body in your hands. The ground time here is brief. Drop your framework down and fly. It has fed you. It will feed your friends. I went to the valley, but I didn't go to stay. I stand on my father's ground, not breaking. It holds me up like a hand my father pushes. Virginia, I am in Virginia. The magic word rocked in my father's box like heaven. The magic line in my hand. But where is the Africa in this? Except the grass is green, is greener, he would say. And the sky opens a better blue. And in the historical museum, where the slaves are still hidden away like knives, I find a paper with a name I know. His name, their name, Sales, the name he loved. I stand on my father's ground, not breaking. There is an African in this, and whose ever name it has been, the blood is mine. My soul got happy, and I stayed all day. New bones. We will wear new bones again. We will leave these rainy days, break out through another mouth, into sun and honey time. Worlds buzz over us like bees. We be splendid in new bones. Other people think they know how long life is, how strong life is. We know. And I'll read just two more. Although I might have just lost track. This is one of her poems that is very dear to many people. I remember reciting this with my dear friend Camilla Aisha Moon at a booth at the Dodge Poetry Festival many years ago. I remember reading this toward a group of students, and one of the students in the room crying and mouthing the words back to me. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and women. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. And I'll close with this poem, Birthday. Birthday. Today we are possible. The morning, green and laundry sweet, opens itself and we enter, blind and mewling. Everything waits for us. The snow kingdom, sparkling and silent in its glacial cap. The cane fields, shining and sweet in the sun-drenched south. as the day arrives with all its clumsy blessings. What we will become waits in us like an ache. Thank you, everyone.
What an amazing treat to be able to hear Lucille Clifton spoken by and through Aracelis Girmay. We'll now continue our celebration by listening to an intimate discussion about Lucille Clifton between Aracelis and Michael Silverblatt. If you haven't visited our auction yet, I encourage you to do so through the link in our chat section or by typing in 32auctions.com/BOA. The auction will only be open until tomorrow, September 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So place your bids and keep track of your orders. Michael Silverblatt is a literary critic and literary champion. Since 1989, he has served as host of the nationally syndicated Bookworm radio program, broadcasted out of Los Angeles' public radio station, KCRW, and available in numerous online venues, including as an NPR podcast. A lifelong fan of literature in all its forms, Michael also holds a special place in his heart for Lucille Clifton. I hope you'll enjoy this discussion about Lucille Clifton between Aracelis and Michael Silverblatt.
Hello, my name is Michael Silverblatt. I am the host of a radio show which airs nationally and even internationally called Bookworm. It is produced in Los Angeles at the radio station National Public Radio, KCRW. I am here to celebrate the life of Lucille Clifton, along with a marvelous poet, Aracelis Girmay, Aracelis Girmay, and we have both adored Lucille Clifton for many years, but Aracelis has edited a selected volume of Lucille Clifton's poetry, How to Carry Water, which is published by BOA Editions. It's a beautiful book. They've done a beautiful job. I have to acknowledge that both the book and my program are indebted to the great generosity of the Lannan Foundation. Now, I want to begin by asking you, Aracelis, how did you start to read Lucille Clifton?
Yeah, you know, Michael, it's one of those things. I remember where I was standing in the school library. I was in high school and away at boarding school. And it was a time that felt like a very challenging, wonderful, and lonely set of years. And I had somehow found Toni Morrison and Kate Rushin, and like was just randomly making my way through the library and finding writers and voices that felt somehow like home to me, many of them Black women writers. And I came upon Lucille Clifton's work. I think it was probably the title that probably stood out to me, although I can't remember if that's what it was that made me pull the book off the shelf. But I remember I was facing north in the high school library and opened her book of poems and have been reading her ever since. She's a compass to me.
To whole generations of writers and Black writers, and she's meant a great deal. You know, when I first met her, many of her poems are about being a grandmother and her own grandmother and her mother. They're about generations. She had, what, 6 children, 7? But in particular, 2 daughters almost always were with her when I would see her. We saw each other at my radio station. We did public events together. And you know, what's marvelous is that Aracelis is the author of 3 wonderful and award-winning books of poetry, also published by BOA. And the effect of Lucille Clifton is very much there in your work. Are you able to describe what that influence is like?
I think, you know, I can't be positive, but when I think that the book that I found in high school was probably the Book of Light. The years line up, and I think that that's probably right. And what struck me then, some of what struck me then still strikes me today, which is this kind of, this worldview that I could sense in the work, which has something to do with kinship among all things, the tiniest creatures, the most beloved family members, the starlight, the dreams of people who gave her names, right? So there's this way that she's writing about severance and loss, and such tremendous loss and hardship. Everything from climate crisis to abortion and reproductive rights, to sexual abuse, to war. And she writes in a way where her own trouble is a part of what she's wondering about. Like, she writes about the cockroaches and her own, how she killed the cockroaches and she wanted every one of them gone. And so don't talk to me about cruelty. She wrote about her own cruelty and cruelty of others towards her, but with such complexity and love, and with a deep belief that all things are connected, which I think that just strikes me deeply. Like, I feel that's something I believe in. I don't know if it's a core of my poetics, but in terms of a kind of ethical view, I just believe in her so deeply. I think that there's a mightiness there that helps me to live, you know.
I'm completely in agreement with you. As I bet you know, every time she signed a book, and she signed all of my books, I find, she would write joy, exclamation point, and then her name, and that she was able to write about such powerful difficulty and darkness, and yet experience it as joy. That this is what life is, and that life is full of joy. She was, you know, a person who could talk about things that you don't see spoken about. She was a large, hipped Black woman, and she writes about that. She wishes that she were slim-hipped, but she is a proud, large, Black woman, and she speaks about her relationship to men and to others as being that figure. And she grew into it. When I met her, you see, I grew up with my grandmother living in the house, and so I deeply identified her, not just as a grandmother figure, but as a mystic, spiritual grandmother figure. And what do you think about that mysticism and that almost magic spell power that runs through her work?
I love that question. I love, right now, because you just shared that about your grandmother, and I'm thinking about her relationship to her mother, who she has this brilliant poem, February 13th, 1980, where she talks about the death of her mother. And as many people know, her mother died on February 13th. And then, so it was a date that she held close. And then she herself also died on February 13th. And I think about this, the poem where she talks about her name. She was named after her mother and her grandmother, and she was named after this grandmother, and who witnessed this great grandmother who witnessed the murder of her own daughter. And she closes the poem. She says, "Mine already is an African name." But I think of Lucille Clifton as somebody. This has to do with the mysticism, maybe, as somebody who somehow, my feeling when I read her is that she seems to be somebody who could read the repetitions across time and could read the resonances of history, and how she is a Lucille named after her great-great-grandmother Lucille. She is a Thelma named after her mother Thelma.
Well, one of the things that I absolutely love, perhaps it's Sonia Sanchez, but one of the poets you spoke to said that people mentioned Lucille Clifton and an old-fashioned smile crosses their face, and that she wants to help to rid the world of that old-fashioned smile and help people see Lucille Clifton not as some funky old lady, but as a ferocious and vibrant woman who was always writing poetry, who was the spirit, really, of poetry. To many of the people in the younger generation, they had never seen a person like Lucille Clifton who absolutely lived the life of a poet, was never not a poet. I think we should, in a sense, restart by reading her celebration poem, which is part of this beautiful book, How to Carry Water, while there is an enormous volume of collected poems. This is the selected poems. They were chosen by Aracelis, whom I'm talking to, and I think it's a whole side. She has chosen the Lucille Clifton that we're going to see in this book. There are many, many Lucille Cliftons, but this is a Lucille Clifton who will wipe that silly smile off your face. Okay, let's hear the celebration poem.
Sure. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed.
What a source of celebration, yes, that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. I mean, it's an amazing perception. And I think that one of the things that Lucille does most magnificently is to invite us all to see, and especially today, these poems retain their vibrancy. We are living among something that will try to kill us and will fail. And we are here to celebrate that failure and to join Lucille Clifton in understanding that that is a source of joy. Now, tell me, you came to know her personally, yes?
I would say I met her. I met her a couple of times. I wouldn't say I knew her. But I did have the honor of meeting her at Cave Canem Black Writers Workshop when I was a fellow there, and she came and she gave workshops, and she also, or she visited workshops, and she also stayed, was available to us to sit and ask her questions. And I had the great privilege of introducing her very shortly, very quickly at the top of her reading. And said then, what can I say about Lucille Clifton? She's the Lucille Clifton of her generation. And that was what I had, like pages and pages of notes, but that was the thing that I wanted to say. And I remember she laughed and pointed at me. But I would say I've met her. I've had some short conversations with her, but I did not know her. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I, too, only met her, and we had interview conversations, and yet the depth of her character was such that it felt possible to feel that I knew her. Did you feel that way?
I feel like, I don't know that I felt I knew her, but, I remember seeing her at the Y, 92nd Street Y, years ago, packed. And she started to read a poem about her sister's pimp, Diamond Dick, and the whole, not the whole audience, but many people gasped. And she's up in front of all.
Almost gasped. And I had forgotten about Diamond Dick.
Yeah, and they gasped. And she, she said, Michael, she said, no. Don't do that. She was my sister. This was her life. And she scolded, like I have chills on my face thinking about it, but she just very clearly and sternly, but like moved on quickly, kind of reoriented the folks who gasped. And so I don't feel like I knew her, but there are things that she said. She said, when we were around a workshop table, somebody started to cry, and she said, this thing I think of all the time, and I sometimes do and sometimes don't do it, but she said, somebody touch her. Someone's crying, you touch them. But like my seconds with her or seeing her read, she possessed such something like humility and just integrity and sureness too, that I wouldn't say I knew her, but I think about how she's taught me all the time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it leads to a very important question about Lucille Clifton. She makes poetry writing seem easy, and yet that she rewrote things until she came to the essence of what she was writing. The essential was very important to her, and the ability to be the person to see someone crying and to say, someone touch her. When someone is crying, you touch them, and I think more than that, you hug them. But nevertheless, what do you think about the apparent ease of her poetry?
I had the gift of being in her archives, in her papers at Emory, with my dear friend, who's also a poet, Camilla Aisha Moon. And can you hear me okay? I
can hear you. You're great.
Okay. I lost you for a second there.
We lost each other for a second. Welcome back.
Okay. You can see me. I can't see your screen, but I'll tell you what I was going to say, which is that in those archives, I had the chance of looking at some of her revisions and, watching her take these poems draft after draft after draft and looking at her make these changes in the line breaks or in the diction. For example, there was one poem where she was, I think it was like 11 or 12 drafts that were in the archives. I don't know how many existed, but she was really working on this word, and it had something to do with possibility. My own possible yes, my own possibility yes. And in the end, she eventually changed it after all these drafts to black, my own black yes. And I thought, here's somebody who, it seems, some people, I think, read her work and think, wow, how small these poems fit inside of a poem. They seem relatively straightforward. But then the more you look, the more you realize when you study the craft of it, which I think it's possible to just let it wash over you and not study the craft, and that's great and wonderful. But when you really look at word choice and line break, it's pretty astounding to see that she was in such possession of an understanding of.
My face is there, but it's not moving.
Oops.
I don't know what to do.
Maybe I'll press pause for a second on the recording.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, I
Okay,
see.
I'm back. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yes. Well, it's a wonderful. I remember in your introduction, you talk about that draft where possibility becomes black possibility. That she recognizes that there is a legacy of possibility made prominent by being black, by being African. And it's very important to her. My sense, Aracelis, is that many of these poems, if you start reading the book you've done from the beginning, and I want to start to talk about it now because I think you did a remarkable job, and congratulations. They begin in an impulse that has to do with working magic spells. They are spectacular in their immediacy, and they want the reader practically to reel with excitement at how much of a spell these poems are weaving, especially at the very beginning. Now, you have noticed that she deals with the elements, the basic elements, not the periodic table with all of those elements, but earth, wind, fire, and most prominently, water, which is why this book is called How to Carry Water. And in her poetry, you see earth, wind, fire, and water coming again and again to flood and yet to save, to burn down and yet to give light. She really has a prominent instinct for the hand-in-hand nature of destruction and possibility, building, construction at the same time. And I think that is what helped you organize this book.
That's so, I love that way of saying, Michael, because I think that also has to do with this thing I'm wondering about her nouns and verbs, which is that so often the nouns that the verbs that I might attribute to one noun are verbs she attributes to another noun in the same poem. And this happens again and again and again, which I think has to do with a resistance in her work and in her sight and in her vision to simplifying or making singular or single any given thing. And so she possesses cruelty and also has felt the pain of cruelty, right? So the water is a blessing, but it also is something that we survived. And I love that saying of the elements, and that they're complex. It's not that water means one thing or earth means one thing, but the range, the spectrum of each of those elements.
I think that what you had to say about that was brilliant. You point out, yes, that between the noun and the verb, there's a distance. So in Lucille Clifton, the lampposts bloom. It's not just flowers that bloom, it's the lamppost light that blooms, and that, therefore, is the city at night blooming for her. And it was an amazing perception of yours. I was thrilled to see it because it allowed me to read her poems and say, yes, that her parts of speech are as prone to magical spell as the spell she's attempting to cast on the world. I think that this, if you will spend time reading How to Carry Water, which BOA Editions has published and which my lovely guest, Aracelis Girmay, has edited, you will fall inevitably under the spell of this writing. I don't know another writer more powerful or more immediate than Lucille Clifton. Now tell me, you worked on this anthology. Can you describe its spell? Did it work a spell on you?
I mean, I love that word as the word that's repeated in our conversation. I have carried her work so close for so long. And when Peter at BOA approached me with the consent of Miss Lucille's daughters to ask if I would consider editing the selected, I was like, oh my, wow, I need to think about this. She's such, like, how do you make choices about what to include, and what an honor and what a great responsibility. But eventually when I said yes, I just kept reading, and I just really thank Michael Glazer and Kevin Young for like the collected, which is enormous complete Lucille Clifton. And you have to remember, when you look at this book, Lucille Clifton was a woman who wrote, I think, 13 complete books of poetry during her lifetime. This doesn't include pamphlets and, memoirs. Her memoir was edited by Toni Morrison. One of the things that you discovered at Aracelis was correspondence about that manuscript between Toni Morrison and Lucille Clifton, who had the bravery to say to Toni Morrison, I don't agree with that. I do agree with that. No, that verse, you're quite right, is part of my memory. It's part of my mental equipment. It doesn't, you're right, it doesn't belong in the poem. How interesting that you found that. You must have been growing. I went to those archives because I was interested in revision, but I was also hoping to find something of that conversation. Yeah, so felt very lucky to have found it. But to answer your earlier question about the process, I read and read and read again and over again, and just was kind of listening for resonances and repetitions, and imagined that somehow she would tell me what needed to be in the selected, and also the quote of Sonia Sanchez, who said, that old-fashioned smile, that she doesn't want that old-fashioned smile. And I found myself really responding to these mournful and deeply political, sharp, politically minded poems, and realized along the way that those repetitions of Black womanhood and survival and earth and climate, that those were the ones that kept rearing their heads. I dreamt of her. So yes, I was finding her everywhere, which is easy to do because her poems are extraordinary and ordinary. They are, they're filled with the world I can find when I walk outside of my house, my apartment. And so in that way,
beautiful way of putting it, extraordinary and ordinary. And she writes about extraordinary and ordinary events. There's a poem, an extraordinary poem, written on the eve of her lumpectomy. Now, this is an experience that many women have had, but I don't know the poetry of accepting that experience. And one of the things that you also managed to isolate, at least for me, Aracelis, is that there is astrology here, that she is a water woman, that there are fire women, that there are earth women, and that all of this, she even writes about Mother Mary as predicted by astrologer in her birth. I mean, you really managed to not only isolate the extraordinary and passionate ferocity in Lucille Clifton, you've managed to show how she arrives at her essentials. You mentioned once that you were in a pizza parlor, was it, downstairs from your apartment, and a waiter came over. Tell the story, please.
Yeah. This is there's a coffee shop downstairs on the bottom floor of my apartment building, and this was right after when I came to How to Carry Water as the idea for the title from her poem Water Sign Woman. It was one of those moments. I had a couple of other ideas, and I was in touch with Peter about it. And when that came, I thought, it just felt like yes. And just after that, I was downstairs in the coffee shop, and this young person was giving me my coffee and saw that I had the huge Lucille Clifton collected, and looked at it and said, "Oh my gosh, Lucille Clifton! I love the poem about the hips." And I was so surprised, happily surprised, that he knew what the book was and that he loved the poem for her hips. And then we had a very quick conversation, and I have his email address, but I asked, when I was saying goodbye, I just asked, "What's your name?" And he said, "River." And I thought, oh, how perfect, there's the water right there. But that happened all of the time, and those repetitions happen all of the time throughout her work too. Her 12 fingers, just a disciplined attention, which is something that Audre Lorde talks about. But I think Lucille Clifton, there's just the disciplined attention, and everything is connected. It just takes the attention of realizing it, you know. Yeah.
Well, I would like everyone at Dine Rhyme to join me and Aracelis in celebrating the work of Lucille Clifton. And really, there's no point, well, there's loads of point in celebration, but I really believe once you've heard the work talked about in such a beautiful way by Aracelis, it's time to read How to Carry Water. Take it home with you. Learn to live with the insight of Lucille Clifton. And I want to thank you all, and in particular, to thank Aracelis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Michael and Aracelis for sharing their time and insights into Lucille Clifton's incredible body of work. To hear more, Michael will be hosting Aracelis on his Bookworm radio program on Thursday, September 17th, so please check that out. If you haven't yet, I also encourage you to visit our live auction by going through the link in our chat section or by typing in 32auctions.com/BOA. The auction features limited edition broadsides, signed Lucille Clifton books, subscriptions for magazines and workshops, but most excitingly, it offers the opportunity to speak by Zoom or by phone to nearly 50 different BOA authors. And the best part, it all supports the nonprofit publishing mission of BOA Editions as we bring vital voices to a world of readers. The auction will only be open until tomorrow, September 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So place your bids now and remember to check on your items. Our Dine Rhyme celebration continues now with an excerpt from a mini documentary being produced by Hunger Media and BOA Editions. We hope you will enjoy this first glimpse of Lucille Clifton, a poet's life and legacy, and look forward to sharing the complete documentary with you later this fall. We give special thanks to LitTap for their grant and support of this video project. Enjoy.
Seeing her write at a kitchen table, at a dining room table, at an old-fashioned manual typewriter was something that seemed just so natural.
Granddaughter, someone is helping me with the onions, who peels in the opposite direction without tears and promises different soup. I sit with her, watching her, learning to love her, but who is she? Who is she? Who?
I think of her as somebody who is able to speak so directly in her poems, who's reckoning with like some of the most immense, epic, difficult things to reckon with: the loss of children, the loss of a spouse, sexual abuse, racism, violence, racialized violence. And there's such fierce looking, there's such anger and tenderness and forgiveness.
She was making sense of things. She was translating something from some very visceral place into words that people could digest and then feel that would resonate with people, they would feel less alone, that they would feel understood. They could translate whatever this big thing was into like, that's what it is. Yes. My mother's work and her legacy can be part of that resolution, that balm, that comfort, that way forward in what times that have seemed darker than we thought they might be when we were imagining 2019 and 2020.
All of these things we're precariously here, carrying these questions about what human rights mean and are, what our responsibility to the planet might be to each other. And these are things that are central to her work across decades.
And honestly, it's the legacy of keeping a space open for poets of color, for underserved writers. I think we're hoping that this election, the Blessing the Boat selections, will be sort of will have that ripple effect. That poets who are featured then have a space, and they then make a space, and they continue. The spaces get wider and wider and wider, and that continues. That doesn't end.
Turning into my own, turning on into my own self at last. Turning out of the white cage, turning out of the lady cage, turning at last on a stem like a black fruit in my own season at last.
What a wonderful sampling of Lucille Clifton, a poet's life and legacy. I can't wait to share the whole thing with you later this fall. Our last segment for this evening features a musical rendition of Lucille Clifton's poem, Let There Be New Flowering, performed by the Cornelius Eady Trio. You may already recognize the trio's sound. That was them you were hearing as you were waiting for this program to begin. Through his work with the trio, National Book Award winner and Pulitzer Prize nominated poet Cornelius Eady sets his and other poets' work to song, telling the story of passing time, the Black American experience, and the blues in the style of folk and Americana music. The Cornelius Eady Trio has performed at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, AWP Conference, Peabody Essex Museum, and Hillstead Museum, and recorded at Sun Studio in Memphis, Tennessee. Performing with Cornelius Eady tonight are Charlie Rao, Lisa Liu, and Conchetta Abate. I would also like to take this opportunity to announce that Cornelius Eady has officially agreed to join BOA's National Advisory Committee, which is dedicated to promoting and forwarding BOA's mission to bring vital voices to a world of readers. This is particularly exciting to us because Cornelius, in addition to being a celebrated poet and co-founder of Cave Canem, a literary organization committed to cultivating the artistic and professional growth of African American poets, was also born and raised in BOA's hometown of Rochester, New York. Welcome aboard, Cornelius, and please enjoy the Cornelius Eady Trio's rendition of Let There Be New Flowering by Lucille Clifton.
Let there be new flowering in the fields. Let the fields turn yellow for the men. Let the men keep tender through the time. Let the time be arrested from the war. Let the war be won. Let love be at the end. Let there be new flowering in the fields. Let the fields turn yellow for the men. Let the men keep tender through the time. Let the time be arrested from the war. Let the war be won. Let love be at the end. Let love be at the end. Let love be at the end.
Wow, what an amazing ending to a magical night. Thank you to the Cornelius Eady Trio. To hear more of their music, please visit corneliuseadytrio.com. If it hasn't already become apparent, we at BOA Editions and countless others love Lucille Clifton. We celebrate her life and work and are committed to promoting her legacy. And we are grateful for all the support for that work that you give and the support that you give for our work with all BOA poets. If you haven't taken the opportunity yet, please visit our live auction at 32auctions.com/BOA or through the link in this chat section. Among other amazing items, you have the chance to chat with one of those BOA authors to discuss your work, their work, or other topics related to literature and life. The auction is open until tomorrow at 11 a.m., so that's September 13th, Eastern Daylight Time. So remember to place your bids and check on your items. And good luck. I would like to give heartfelt thanks to our BOA Editions 23rd Annual Dine Rhyme Committee that met all summer long to put this program together. Thank you to Daphne Morrissey and Kathleen Holcomb. Special thanks to BOA Vice Chair Boo Poulin and to Board Chair Bill Waddell. And thanks also to BOA's hardworking staff, Ron Martin Dent, Genevieve Hartman, Amy Sinise Connors, and our Syracuse University intern, Jess Fenn. I also want to give special thanks again to the Lannan Foundation and to the Lucille Clifton estate, especially her daughters, Sydney, Gillian, and Alexia, for their support of tonight's event. Miss Lucille's daughters are currently hard at work launching the Clifton House in Baltimore, Maryland. Based in the home where the daughters live with their mother and where their mother wrote numerous books of poetry and a memoir, the Clifton House's mission is to continue the legacy of Lucille Clifton and community activist Fred Clifton by providing mentorship, local and global resource access, and training and development in the creative arts to underrepresented and underserved people of all ages in Baltimore and the surrounding communities. To learn more about this great work, visit Lucille Clifton Legacy and the Clifton House pages on Facebook. You can also place your bid to spend an hour chatting with Sydney, Alexia, and Gillian about their mother's life and legacy at 32auctions.com/BOA. For Lucille Clifton fans, that is truly the chance of a lifetime. Once again, thank you to Aracelis Girmay, Michael Silverblatt, Hunger Media, and the Cornelius Eady Trio for helping broaden and expand our appreciation tonight for Lucille Clifton. But most of all, thank you to Lucille Clifton for sharing her words with all of us. The world is a better place because you were in it. As feels appropriate, I'd like to end tonight's program with a reading of Lucille Clifton's poem, Blessing the Boats. May the tide that is entering even now the lip of our understanding carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever. And may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. Thank you all for being a part of tonight's Dine Rhyme. Good night.
Let there be new flowering in the fields. Let the fields turn yellow for the men. Let the men keep tender through the time. Let the time they rested from the war. Let the war be won. Let love be at the end. Let there be new flowering in the fields. Let the fields turn mellow for the men. Let the men keep tender through the time. Let the time be rested from the war. Let the war be won. Let love be at the end. Let love be at the end. Let love be at the end.